The nature of my true divine self is healthy, happy, loving, successful, and prosperous. And I'm healthy, happy, loving, and beloved, successful, and prosperous. Why? Because it is the nature of my true divine self. So here again, the question always is, am I thinking about my divine nature, or am I thinking about my human nature? We should always know this. And this wonderful scripture from the book of Job, let's read that together. Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. Thereby good shall come unto thee. You see, so you've been acquainting yourself with the wrong concept of yourself. And this is what we do in these classes. This is what we do in these services here. We teach you to acquaint yourself with the divinity of you. And there are certain things which are natural to the divine self. Health, for example, is the nature of the divine self. And health is divinely natural. I always smile whenever I read or hear that someone died of natural causes. And people used to go to the witchcraft workers to find out if their sickness was natural. And I'm going to tell you right now, no, your sickness is not natural. Yeah. Health is natural. Say that with me. Health is natural. It's natural for you to be healthy. And we'll make a personal affirmation out of that. It's natural for me to be healthy. Come on. It is natural for me to be healthy. Now, I'd like to expand on that even further and say, it is divinely natural for me to be healthy. Together, it is divinely natural for me to be healthy. You know, in the world mind would have you believe that it's natural to be sick. And if you don't get all of those sicknesses that go around, why, people think you're oddball. And I've had people say to me, yes, Reverend Ike, but you know, you got to have something to take you out of this world. Now, I don't need sickness to take me out of this world. I can find better ways of going. And people are just conditioned to this. You can choose how you leave this world. You can program it. As a matter of fact, you do anyway, either consciously or unconsciously. Like, for example, we talk about accidents, and no such thing as accidents. But most people live unconsciously. But remember that health is divinely natural. And it is the wish of God in you that you should be healthy. And I love to read this scripture from 3 John. Let's read it together. Beloved, I wish that you would be in health. People have their minds mixed up as to what God's will is. Well, if it's the Lord's will for me to suffer, I'll just have to suffer. Well, you know you have to suffer. Maybe so, but I've done mine. And I ain't gonna study war no more. I did mine when I didn't know any better. But now that I do stand awake, I my throne do wisely take, and rule my kingdom, which is me, a master through eternity. So you just remember that sickness is no part of God's plan for you. Let us know also that happiness is divinely natural. And I'm sure some of us, anyway, know of religious people who seem to think that in order to please the Lord, you have to be miserable, at least to a certain extent. And do you know there are people who have so much religion that they feel guilty to feel happy? Like people who say, how can you sit down here and eat all of this good food? These Americans over here eating all this good food and other people are starving. I said, well, hell, it won't help me to starve with them. I'm not going to be miserable because other people are starving. That doesn't make my steak taste any less good. Somebody said the other day, yes, the Americans are eating themselves to death while others are starving to death. I said, well, if I had a choice, I would choose the former. And some people think that, well, maybe because somebody else is miserable that, you should be miserable too. And there are people, you got to watch your friends and your relatives. Sometimes they'll get themselves into some kind of a situation. And if you don't be miserable with them, they'll be insulted. And it is true, yes, misery does love company. When the news of Lazarus' death reached Jesus and his disciples, you remember some of the disciples said, well, Lord, let's go and die with him. But happiness is divinely natural. And don't you think for one moment that your being miserable is going to help the miserable. Your being hungry won't help the hungry. Your being needy will not help the needy. It just creates more need. And the best thing that you can do for poor people is to not be one of them. That will reduce the population of poverty at least by one. Let there be wealth on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be happiness on earth, and let it begin with me. So you remember that. One of the best ways you can help people who are sad is by not being one of them. Now, I never want anybody to pity me anyway. Oh, you poor thing, you. I feel. And you have to watch that sympathy. Sympathy can be a deadly thing to the person that you give it to. As a matter of fact, sympathy is a terrible thing even to give yourself. Sympathy kills you if you give it to yourself. Now, some people have just buried themselves in self-pity. And self-pity always magnetizes you for pitiful things to happen to you. That's why you get all kicked around and pushed around. You pity yourself. And when you pity yourself, you're asking for something to give you a reason to pity yourself. That's what you're asking for. If you pity yourself, you're asking for a kick in the behind. And you are going to get it. You married the meanest man there ever was.
It sure will.
So self-pity asks for trouble. But happiness is divinely natural, and the prophet sings out, the joy of the Lord is your strength. There's something dynamic and magnetic about joy, about being happy. And if you permit this divine happiness to dwell in your heart, you will always be drawing happy situations into your experience. You'll draw happy people to you. You go around being miserable, you'll draw miserable people to you. Some of you, that's all you've got anyway, a circle of miserable friends. A circle of miserable relatives. And you never hear from them unless they're at a jam and need some money. So I tell you, change your phone number. And don't even move, and don't even let your old auntie know where you are. It'd be like the man you sang in that old blues long ago. He said, I'm going to move way on the outskirts of town. And I don't want no miserable people always hanging around. Now don't fool around, and if you find miserable people always flocking under your coattail, watch out. Yes, sir. Be happy, look happy, feel happy, and smell happy. You'll always be drawing happy, interesting people into your experience. Love is divinely natural. And all the three wonderful words, God is love. And when you understand that love is the unity of all things, then you'll be drawing all of the right people into your experience for every right purpose. And for you to experience love correctly, you have to first love yourself, your divine self. Now, there's no need looking for anybody to love you unless you love yourself correctly first. That's why I don't go for these people, these so-called self-sacrificing religious people who say, well, I love the whole world. I don't care much about myself. I just love other people. You go around trying to give your life for the world. A lot of good people tried that and it didn't work. Jesus wouldn't do it again. He wouldn't do it again. So it didn't do any good. I'm just trying to give all my life to others. You self-conceited hypocrite. If it wasn't in church, I'd say it a little differently. You give yourself first, you hear me? Because you can't give other people what you haven't first given yourself. You give yourself the right idea of yourself. You give yourself the divine idea of yourself. And then you'll give divinity to everybody else. You'll touch the divinity in others. And when others realize the divinity within them, it will be the greatest blessing that you could convey. But I urge you, God is love, and you ought to love yourself correctly first. And I want to be redundant about this, and it is your divine self. If you're not careful, you have to be careful with this teaching, or you'll think I'm teaching some type of egocentric philosophy. Love the divine self of you. Love the God in you. Love the right idea of yourself. The divine idea of yourself deserves to be loved. And this is loving God. You don't love God until you love yourself. Some religions even go so far as to teach people to hate themselves and love God at the same time. And people have been taught to punish themselves and to whip themselves and to beat themselves bloody to show how they hate themselves and love God. Such utter nonsense and insanity. You cannot love others correctly until you love yourself correctly, and others cannot love you correctly until you love yourself correctly. Yes, and I say you should be proud of yourself. And if you know your real self, you will be proud of your real self. You should be proud to know that God in you is you. And I have to keep repeating again and again, and if you're following me, you see that I'm not talking about human self-conceit. And you should congratulate yourself from time to time. As you recognize your divine self and see your divine self expressing, you should congratulate yourself. And you ought to be able to look and to see what God is doing in you and through you and as you. And say, oh, I'm so proud of what God is doing in me, through me, and as me. And praise the divine self as it lives in you, through you, and as you. And the more it will pour forth itself through you. This is divine self-pride. This is not human self-pride at all. Love is divinely natural, and that love must begin with you loving your divine self correctly. You loving the right idea of yourself. Loving yourself as a child of God. Loving yourself as an expression of God.